Welcome back to AITSM Show. We are starting a fresh season right now with women thought leaders in AITSM. So the very first episode we are doing with Neethi Upadhya, Associate Director, ServiceNow, IBM. She had a rich experience in ITSM. Neethi, we are really proud to have you as our first woman thought leader guest here for AITSM show interviews. Please tell us about your experiences, your story, how you got started, and what are the things which in AITSM no one talks about.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you for having me here. To start with, let me quickly give what is my experience so far as such, right? So I have been in the IT industry for the last 18 years, and 18 years has been predominantly IT service management itself. I started in 2004, where I started you must have heard of a IT service management tool called BMC Remedy. So I started out as a developer in BMC Remedy at that point of time, and then gradually progressed to doing larger transformation implementations on BMC Remedy up to 2012, and then moved into ServiceNow. So since then, I've been on the ServiceNow tool as such, doing a lot of implementations on that on various customers, worked for various partners of ServiceNow. And at this point, I work in IBM, Associate Director there in the ServiceNow practice, managing most of the solutions as such. So that's a quick introduction about myself.
Great. You have seen that the 2 decades of ITSM there and a lot of challenges there, or maybe a lot of challenges which you had overcome. Do you think anything which is in ITSM, which is a kind of, as you said earlier, there is an elephant in the room which no one talks about? What is that? I am really excited to hear about that.
See, what I've been observing for the last few years is we have a lot of these buzzwords coming up everywhere, right? We have people talk about digital transformation, they talk about automation, they talk about increasing productivity and all of that. But then what I've always seen when organizations start on the journey of a digital transformation or IT transformation predominantly, what is mostly not discussed or what gets completely deprioritized is the configuration management database there, the CMDB as we call it, right? Which is the crux of an organization as such in the IT landscape. See, what we see is, and you can also comment, is the IT and the way IT works has transformed phenomenally over the last decade. When we started talking about just service management or IT service management, probably 10, 12 years back, we were talking about predominantly on, okay, how do I manage when a failure occurs? How do I ensure that the availability of my system is there? But at this point of time, I see over these decades, the way it's changed, there's been a paradigm shift, right? All of them have moved from just looking at how do I fix a failure to actually looking at what value do I deliver to my end customer as such. So IT is also becoming completely business focused and business outcome based. So when that kind of a paradigm shift happens and you want to bring in those transformations in your landscape, you as a first setup, you have to know as to what is there in your landscape to be able to transform it. Right? The inventory has to be right. And also what I've also seen is a lot of organizations deprioritize CMDB thinking, oh, it's just inventory. I can have that in my Excel spreadsheets. That does not work, because if you continue to have those siloed spreadsheets managed across the organization, there is very less integration that can be brought into picture, right? So when you have to look at a transformation, you have to deliver more with less. That's your digital transformation. You have to ensure that you are increasing the productivity across the organization, and having siloed spreadsheets does not cater to that. You have to reduce cost. So you cannot have 15 departments doing small spreadsheets and then trying to integrate that spreadsheet. That means you're just killing your productivity and increasing your cost. So with all that in mind, first thing, I think that there should be an executive sponsorship in a particular digital transformation engagement to look at how you can improve your CMDB, digitize it, ensure that it's all managed, governed in a way that it can scale up your transformation activities as such, and not become a hindrance to it. So that's where I would say people have to start looking at, and that's the topic that I wanted to talk about today.
Right. Probably when a CMDB is taken till lightly in some places, and sometimes a bigger issue or bigger challenges comes, there would be immediately a kind of a firefighting mode there. Is there a
Absolutely.
story? Is there a story behind that? From any experience, you can tell what kind of challenges we can have when
Yes.
there is no CMDB governed and managed digitally.
This is one of my own experiences that I've seen a couple of years back managing one of the platforms and for a customer, right? So whenever there is a P1 incident that happens, right, on a platform, you have a business impact. A lot of the times when a P1 gets documented or it gets created or incident is registered as such as you want to call it usually happens when a business user not able to access an application or I'm not able to access a particular portal. Maybe that's a financial service portal. You never know. So when you have a user complaining, it means you've already lost time because all the impact is already realized by the user. Then you start looking at, okay, what is the issue? What is not working? Is it actually a particular application which is not working? Or is it something else not working? So all of that discussions that happen between teams, you start checking, testing, and then you start looking at what is the connectivity that you have from the application to the infrastructure, what services are managing this particular application. With all of that, by the time you realize what's the actual core of the issue, you have lost time, right? That's productive hours that is lost for that particular application. And then is when you start resolving. There was a saying that if the P1 resolution takes 7 hours, 6 hours is just to understand which particular team had to be contacted for the P1 resolution as such. So that was how it was earlier, right? Even in there, without having the right CMDB, without having the right relationships in the CMDB, by the time you detect what is actually causing the P1, majority of the time was already getting lost. With all that, I think the focus shifted to a certain extent on CMDB. I have an incident, let me get a CI attached to the incident. But then there was nothing, a couple of years back, there was still nothing much done from the point that, okay, the user should not report an incident, how get detected in the system so that we have less impact on the customer experience as such. What I was thinking from a perspective is with a lot of changes happening in the landscape itself, most of the organizations looking at IT transformation, most of the organizations looking at ensuring they uplift the customer experience at the end of the day. How and what should be done from the CMDB perspective so that you can achieve your end results or the business outcomes that you want to achieve, right? So I think that's where a lot of thought process should go in now from the organizations as such.
So the first thing you told about is getting executive sponsorship and moving towards more points. What could be our approach towards CMDB?
The point of stressing on the executive sponsorship for this is because CMDB cannot be built in silo.
Right.
There is not one team or one unit within the organization that can completely build your CMDB, right? I think that used to be the case a few years back, a decade back, probably, when you would have one team managing a spreadsheet and that could be loaded into your CMDB. But then now the landscapes have changed. It's got very federated, and there's a lot of this multi-integration that needs to be brought into picture to be able to build a CMDB constructively, right? And also when I talk about business sponsorship is because there's a lot of every CI that gets into your CMDB somewhere touches your business services, right? And that impact should also get cascaded onto the CMDB data as such, because then we should be able to realize which are your top critical business services, which are your top business applications related to those services, and then the corresponding infrastructure and the relationships so that you have a view. So when I talk about this, it means you are not just having your IT team sit and build the CMDB as such. Your enterprise architects are coming into picture here. Your application architects are coming into picture, and your service architects. So with all of them coming in and designing means that there's funding that will be needed to get this done. That effort that needs to get this done. And that comes in easier to maneuver through the organization if you have an executive sponsorship for such activities as such.
So while we sort out the executive sponsorship and then the budget, then licensing and every part of tooling aspects come in or infrastructure part comes in. So how do we ensure that the governance is planned in such way that it will have certain kind of automated way of telling you which systems might be requiring maintenance, which systems might be requiring new licenses? So is there something we do about it?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think that is a very critical part of your CMDB as such, right?
Mhm.
Adding your inventory is the beginning of it, but then managing, governing is critical step for a successful CMDB. So when you
True.
talk about it, so what we've also seen a lot of times in our implementations is we have tools now which can discover your landscape, right? So you can
Hmm.
run those, scan the landscape as such, and get the required data into your CMDB.
Mhm.
But then what happens is a lot of organizations, when such scans run, it just dumps
Hmm.
whatever is in your landscape, right?
Right.
Then what needs to be managed from a business perspective? Do I have to manage all the 500 classes of configuration items that gets discovered by a tool?
Mhm.
Or do I have to understand my top classes that I need to discover, manage, govern, so that at the end of the day, I'm helping my business service be more available, right?
True. True.
So that's the thought process that has to run. So every time you understand your CMDB, you have to understand how is the business impact of a particular class of a CI that comes into the system, along with what attributes have to be managed, which is going to give value to the CMDB as such. That is
Right.
one aspect, right? The second, when you talk about automations, there's a lot of tools and integrations that are possible. Just one landscape, you would have your legacy data centers where you would run a scan and get all the data into CMDB. But
Mhm.
now a lot of our customers, as you see, are not on a data center or legacy data centers predominantly. Now we see a lot of hybrid environments that have come in. So when you have that, it's a mix and match between what's on premise on a data center to what is on the cloud,
True.
right? So that you have to integrate into so that you can get your entire landscape in managed in CMDB. So
Mhm.
that is another aspect that people have to start looking at, saying what information is coming through one of the two, what is the additional federated information that I need to add, so my CMDB becomes more meaningful.
All right. Thanks a lot, Neethi. We will continue this insightful discussion in the next episode. Please stay tuned. Bye bye.